Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Chris Martenson. Welcome to this Signal Hour, where, of course, we are trying to find the signal within the signal. Since the election, X has kind of been the signal. I think it's not too much to say that if Elon Musk had not come along and, bought Twitter and turned it into X and made it into a free speech platform, we'd be living in a very, very different world today. I value free speech above almost everything, maybe everything, and it's the only way we get to truth. There's no such thing as truth. What there is finding out what's not true, what the BS is in the story, and whittling away at that till you get to something that approximates the truth. And that's the world we live in, and it's getting to be a really crazy, fast changing world. And that's a model I have in something called The Crash Course, a seminal work I put out in 2008, updated it in 2011, then 14, and I'm updating it again. But it basically posits that there's this thing called exponential growth, exponential change, which can have both a positive and a negative aspect. The positive aspect, wow, look how crazy good our technology seems to be getting. Negative aspect, things are changing so fast that our human wetware, hardware, software, cultural institutions don't seem to be up to the task of maintaining an even keel in that chaos and the complexity. So that's the world we're in. How do you make sense of that? How do you make decisions? That's what the Signal Hour is all about. So, Evie, good to see you here again today.
Good afternoon. Good to be here with everybody. Welcome.
Yeah. One of our two favorite times of the week, because we do Signal Hour now twice a week, Wednesdays and Fridays. So,
Fridays.
Yeah. Now, last time, Evie, we talked about this, and I just wanted to go over it not go over it very quickly. So I think this is a big bombshell. A lot of people have been saying, so we're going to discuss several things today. One of them, at least, is going to be the gulf of nobody has been arrested yet. So the Trump administration puts out this big bombshell, which, as we reviewed, was actually kind of already known information to those of us who'd been tracking this.
Right.
5 years late and $1 short, but it came out. And it's pointed fingers and named names, at least a few of them, right?
Yep.
And that's good. And I had this fancy thing. So one of the rogues galleries, so one of the things that I really didn't like in this whole period was when I was out there talking about how, hey, looks like coronavirus had some obviously lab engineered features, whether it was deliberately released or accidentally released, I don't know. You would need an investigation for that. But to conclude that it came from a lab was relatively easy, scientifically speaking. But as soon as I said that, there was all these virologists in the world came around. Do you remember? And they first,
they picked on you.
Oh, they did. And they were so unhappy. And first they tried the shaming angle, and then they tried the appeal to authority. Are you a virologist? Like, well,
You're
no,
not
but
qualified.
I'm not making nonsense come out of my mouth like you guys, right? And then to prove just how dangerous misinformation was, rather than honestly engaging with anybody, they went out and blocked everybody and then made their own little echo chamber on Twitter that I know because I have a sock puppet account. I have several accounts. I have my main one through the front door. It's me. I don't hide. I don't use a pseudonym, for better or worse, it's my name on the line. But I have other accounts because I get blocked by various people. And I still want to know what they were up to. And this was back at the time when you couldn't, you couldn't see a blocked account. Now you can be blocked, but you can still see what they're saying, but you can't comment. But back then you were excluded. So I had to know what they were saying. So I go into their little clubs and they're all just congratulating each other. And, we're showing them, and they would take little forays out to dunk on people. And I ended up calling them the Mean Girls Virology Club. And I think the top mean girl was Dr. Angela Rasmussen, who I even interviewed at one point.
That's right. I know this name. You guys probably do too.
Yeah.
It was you guys. She says, actual experts being wrong is not what diminished trust.
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't the experts being wrong that diminished trust. What was it, Evie?
It was greedy, self-interested conspiracists with no expertise, like Alina, whoever that is.
Alina Chan.
Alina Chan lying constantly about the evidence base and baselessly accusing actual experts like Fauci, co-authors, me, of misconduct that destroyed public trust.
That's what it was.
That's what it was.
It wasn't the fact that they lied, they hid emails, that they spouted scientific nonsense, that they said things that were patently untrue, that they never backed up and said, oops, our bad,
We're
that they
sorry.
acted literally like a bunch of mean girls, right?
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure Angie here, I don't think she has friends because friends don't let friends drunk tweet.
Do you think that's a drunk tweet?
Well, she has lots of tweets where she's showing herself like making martinis and things. So, she plays it up herself that she drinks a bunch, but sometimes I'm wondering, are we looking at drunk tweets? Because,
Yeah, it could be.
you never quite know. All right. I just want to point.
It seems like a feature for some reason in the scientific community. It's like very smart individuals, but like not necessarily emotionally intelligent. I've noticed a pattern.
Particularly amongst doctors. Not all, but enough, right? To say, ooh, there's a pattern going on here. So this is an example of that. By the way, Justin Hart, my favorite saying here is that, once is an accident, right? Twice is coincidence, but 3 times is enemy action. So what is this exactly over here, Evie? We don't have to read all of those. We'll just let people sort of read some of those, but
unbelievable.
It's not just that they got something wrong.
They got everything wrong.
They got everything wrong.
PCR testing, the fatality rate. How can you not read this? Asymptomatic spread, lockdowns, community triggers, business closures, school closures, quarantining healthy people, impact on youth and young, children, hospital overload, plexiglass barriers, social distancing, outdoor spread, which is a joke, masks, variant impact, natural immunity, vaccine efficacy, and vaccine entry. All of those.
Wow.
That's quite the list.
It is, don't you think?
Yeah, I do.
All right, so I just want to sort of put a couple more bows on last week's Wednesday's piece. All right, so Evie, we're on my least favorite part of the show, which is day 94, Arrest Watch, and it's my least favorite part because, as you know, I'm convinced that if people who did things bad in the past aren't brought to justice, we'll just get more of it. No consequences, nothing changes.
Yeah.
Trump should know that. Cash should know that. Bondi should know that. If you don't, and by the way, when you're out of power next, because the pendulum doth swing, they're coming after you. Full stop.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely.
Like if they're just going to be so angry that...
Not even angry. They did it before.
It's true.
Right?
But I mean, they're angry that Trump has been trying to change things, that this administration has made some strides to cut waste and ridiculous spending and to deport people that, don't have citizenship, etc. So I think they're going to be angry. Like they seem like the kind of people that would do it just to punish you for crossing them, kind of a thing.
All right. Well,
you're probably right.
Let's mark it as we go along. So as of April 25th, we'll have to dial our counter. That goes to 0. Nobody arrested for the Jeffrey Epstein. Remember, that was the first thing. Day 1, we're going to see the Epstein files. And then Pam Bondi does this big kabuki theater, and then she releases some documents very embarrassingly, like gives it to a few social influencers, DC Drano and some other folks on TikTok. And here are these binders, and they probably thought they were getting some goods. Imagine opening those up and finding out that the Justice Department has redacted files you've already had for a decade with nothing new in them. Like it's less than nothing.
New
because
redactions.
We already had that, but you redacted it.
That's ridiculous.
It was so bad.
That's so stupid.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating because I think as people, we deserve some action on this case.
Yep.
Right? This has been sitting around for how many years now? The Jeffrey Epstein case, we've had all this data for a long time, right? How many years?
It's like, well, I mean, since he
died?
Well, since the rumor started, but since he was first charged, which was 2006.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
I knew it was a while, but wow.
Long time ago.
That is a long time.
Then you got a little house arrest. And then...
And we have Ghislaine. Isn't she...
First person in history to go to prison for running prostitution victims, underage prostitution victims, to nobody.
Yeah. We ran a business and nobody utilized our services. It's ridiculous.
Which brings us to, yes, once again, still the gulf of no one has been arrested yet. But you know what it is, Evie? You know what we're seeing?
Mm.
It's like, oh, this just came out yesterday.
Breaking after
Breaking.
several meetings with officials inside the Trump Justice Department, arrests will begin soon, says Trump ally Mike Davis. Okay.
Yeah, soon. Mañana. Any day now.
Well, I have to be this person though.
94 days,
like,
zero.
No, I know, but for anybody that's ever had any kind of a legal case, it does take quite a long time. It takes way longer than you think for all the parts. And
okay, well, by within 60 days, 400 people have been arrested for January 6th.
That's true. Okay, never mind.
Right. And we have some shovel-ready cases here.
That's
right?
true.
John Brennan lying to Congress, CDC losing vaccine injury data, right?
Oh, yeah. That's a bad one.
Lying to the public. I'm sure if you just followed the money, the graft and corruption kickbacks from the Ukraine war would just be like instant. Like, oh, we want to get it all. Like, no, how about you get enough to just charge these people and just set the tone? But here's the thing. There was a Trump revolution underway, which says, okay, we're going to really try and do some really big things. And I've been talking about them for months, and I'm behind a lot of them. One of them is, and we're going to really get to this in part 2, is this idea of a monetary reset and a global trade reset. And it had to happen. So that's a really big, hairy thing, right? A lot of moving pieces on that. We're going to renegotiate all of our trade. Markets are going to be disarrayed. The dollar, we're going to have come up with a new monetary standard. Gold is spiking, all this stuff. Well, to pull that off under the best of circumstances would be challenging, if not very low probability of success. But with a fractured polity who's actively undermining you, the chance drops as close to zero as you can get. And I'm not saying arrest people who are standing in the way of your trade stuff. I'm just saying people who have objectively committed crimes and seditious traitorous crimes against the country, start there.
Right.
The whole Russiagate thing, complete hoax. There are FBI agents who hid the Hunter Biden laptop. They're FBI. I mean, they have names, and none of them have been faced any consequences.
All right, that's fair. I was just thinking about it from, excuse me, the other perspective of, how long it takes to get, evidence and all that stuff lined up, and there's a chain of custody, and you have to. It's just the process can be obnoxiously long.
It can be, but we're on day 94, and I'm starting to feel like this.
Trust the plan. Kids, I waited and trust the plan for 25 years. Even if I didn't know what it was, it's now time for you to trust the plan and make sure you ask your children to trust the plan before you die.
That's becoming a thing you pass on now.
That's a meme. That's funny.
Trust the plan. Trust the plan. It's always mañana. Remember all the Q things? It's just about to happen. Something big's going to happen. Sit back, wait. It's coming. There comes a point. So the question is, you say you still have some faith in it, that it's only 94 days in. These things take time. Maybe this is accurate. Something's going to happen here.
I don't
know. But everybody has an answer to this question. At what point would you admit it just isn't going to happen? Is that the day that Trump leaves office because this is his last term? Is it a year into his first term? Is it 2 years? Where would your line be?
I'd give it a year.
A year? Okay.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think, how when he came in, just gangbusters, like had a bunch of stuff lined up, was ready to go.
Sure.
I mean, this is like my perfect scenario would be that we find out that he's actually got all this lined up and he executes it all in one fell swoop on one day, just all the heads roll. That would be amazing. I don't know if that'll happen, but because otherwise they're going to scurry around and hide things. And like, imagine if he really got a cluster of people all at one time.
We're in a battle. And here's the rule of a battle. It's like a Braveheart.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, two armies come together. Once you get the other dudes running, you chase them and you finish them. You don't just go, oh, okay, well, let me take a couple months off. And then they build defensive fortifications, retrench, and now you have a real problem on your hands. He had the momentum in January. He had the momentum in February. I started to feel it evaporate in March, and now I can really feel it disappearing. The momentum is gone.
Yeah.
Like, the other side is feeling saucy again, and they're doing things. So we got to get to that. And so But first, I just wanted to very quickly say that I have a lot of respect for Jordan Peterson and what he's done in his lectures on Exodus and things like that. Really good. But I don't know if you saw, but there was this whole kerfuffle where Douglas Murray gets on Joe Rogan with Dave Smith, the comedian, and they go at it about some Israeli stuff. And objectively, inarguably, from my standpoint, Douglas Murray lost the debate. So the pro-Zionist, pro-let's kill people, bomb people debate, he lost that. And instead of taking the L and saying, let's figure out how to debate more effectively, or how do we win people over, right? He was smarmy and condescending and talked in circles and used really cheap sort of sophomoric rhetorical tricks, sort of little gotchas. It was not honest inquiry or debate, right? Mm-hmm. And so that, instead of taking the L, they trotted out Jordan Peterson, who comes up with, see if you can see what you think about this. Listen to this argument carefully. Hear what he's saying here.
Well, I think the most important thing to do first is to draw a distinction between the political and the psychological, and not to collapse them together. So imagine this. Imagine that there's a group of individuals, about 4% of the population, who have a set of personality characteristics that have been described as dark tetrad. So they're Machiavellian, they use their language to manipulate, they're narcissistic, they want unearned social status and reputation, they're psychopathic, which makes them free of empathy and parasitical and predatory, and they're sadistic. So they take positive delight in the unnecessary suffering of others. Now, those people also use false cries of victimization, let's say, to manipulate, and they're entitled. They seek vengeance when it's unwarranted, and they protest loudly and make very public cries for reparations that would be self-serving. Okay, now the way those people operate is they look for what patterns of belief form groups that they can infiltrate and then capitalize on. And that happens on the right. We did a report, the same group, on the use of Christ as king as a manipulative strategy by bad actors, hypothetically on the right. And this report identified the same sort of people on the left. But it's not primarily political. They're wolves in sheep's clothing who look for where there's power and value and then adopt those beliefs as a surface camouflage so that they can elevate their moral status. Now, and this has become worse in recent years, as far as I'm concerned, because the evolved strategies that we have for dealing with these psychopathic types, psychopathic narcissistic types, don't work well online. And so the psychopaths can get away with their terrible manipulations online, and they can find like-minded people, and they can escape from any reputational consequences. And so there's always been psychopaths. Those are the Pharisees, for example, that Christ points to, the religious pretenders. Those are the people who use God's name in vain and claim moral virtue and even religious devotion. Well, all they're doing is feathering their own nests and furthering their own narrow interests. And the web, social media, anonymity enables them to organize and also hides them much more effectively. And this is a problem in religious organizations, it's a problem in political organizations, and it pathologizes the whole culture. You know, most people, 80% of Americans agree on virtually everything. And then there's these fringe people, and they're not political. They're psychopathological narcissists who cloak themselves in political guise. And we all have to learn to distinguish between the political and the psychological.
All right. So,
wow.
So he's not wrong in general, right? You one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch.
Sure.
You get yourself a psychopath, a narcissist, like it's a problem.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
All right. And he says, okay, they're on the right and the left. But what he's reacting to was Dave Smith coming on and saying it's a moral abomination for us to be bombing innocent people. Right. It used to be off limits to bomb civilians. It happened, collateral damage. We weren't all that careful about it, but we at least had a moral tissue paper over that practice. That got ripped off with the whole Gaza thing. Now, and we just saw it, the United States just did this. Hey, thumbs up, heart emoji, said, Tulsi Gabbard, because we sent a missile into a residential apartment building because a Houthi military person went into that residential apartment building. They're like, oh, yeah. So the gloves are off now. And this is what he's actually responding to. Is Dave Smith came forward and said, no, this is a moral abomination. We shouldn't do this. And then, of course, Douglas Murray tried to say, oh, are you an expert? Like you have to go to Oxford to have a moral opinion. You do not. You just have to have a moral character.
Right.
You actually have to have some morality.
Right.
That's all. That's all that's required.
Exactly. Or you don't care about it because you've never visited. That was the other.
Well, he's sure those are all the little rhetorical tricks, right? If that didn't work, he had several more because he's a good debater that way. But they're just, you learn them in second year of debate school at Oxford, right? It's just a thing.
Right.
But anyway, so he's coming out, and so he's basically saying this, and here's how Mike Cernovich captured it.
Jordan Peterson is accusing people who disagree with him on foreign wars of being mentally ill. This is Stasi level stuff. He also wants to tie Christ as king to sociopathy and terrorism. This man is working for the demons. That cannot be doubted now.
I think so. So here's my rule. Jordan Peterson's brand is, I'm an intellectual powerhouse, and I think things through carefully and from all sides. It's one of his great debate tactics. He gets to the other side with the other person and understands it and comes back. But then on this one subject, he's just gone completely irrational. And that's like saying I'm a car manufacturer who mostly builds really fine cars, but every so often I build one that blows up. It's not good for the brand.
No, it's not good for the brand. I'm really disappointed in him. He used to be somebody that I know myself and a lot of people that we know respected and appreciated, some of his writing and his the way he spoke. And like you said, he was a great critical thinker. It's disappointing, isn't it? No, when you find out that somebody's fallen off the wagon and you're like, oh man, I guess I can't trust you.
This just tells, look, everybody has a price. I think somehow his price got hit, right? You remember, Jordan was a professor, and then he came under some legal trouble because he lived in a communist country, Canada, and they charged him with like thought crimes, and he had to go to re-education camp, and he said no, and it was difficult. But then he gets picked up by Daily Wire, and all of a sudden his economic circumstances have turned to the point that if you've noticed, every so often he's like, well, now that I have a pile of money, right? So he's got his money, and I think he has a price, and I got an odor off of this that's not good for me. Because I need my people. If your brand is intellectual integrity, you can't be out of integrity in one zone. I mean, this smelled so off to me right here. Very bad. So
yeah, I couldn't really tell whose side he was on. It was confusing.
Hey, I want to take a quick peek at this week at Peak, if we could.
Are you amusing yourself? That's
first off, another fat pipe came out this week, April 21st. We talked about gold, Iran attack averted for now. Trump's oil mistake in the making. This is going to be a big theme coming up this year. You can see we had very active conversation around that. Paul Kiker and I also have a thing called Peak Financial Investing, and we had a really good interview this week, discussion. We talked about Trump's Federal Reserve drama. It was big. China's trade stance, gold surge, all that. So if you have money, wealth, anything you care about, please go to peakfinancialinvesting.com, and we can help you talk to somebody who will not look at you like a dog listening to white noise when you say, should I buy gold? You don't want that from your financial advisor. And then this Wednesday's Signal Hour got really meaty. Wouldn't you agree, Evie?
I think it did. We really dove into some interesting topics, including Renee Girard's theories on mimetic desire and scapegoating.
In the interest of what's the big theory of everything? Like, why are people behaving
Why are
this
they
way?
acting like this?
You got Matthias Desmet giving his, mass formation and the psychosis angle. We've got 5th generation warfare. Is that it? And then there's these theories of mimetic desire, scapegoating. But at any rate,
well, it was interesting.
Important.
It was really important. It was, I think, reorienting for a lot of people, just because we're trying to put together the frame. And this is part of what Chris is very talented at, and what we do at Peak Prosperity with our tribe, with the members there, is we just chew on this and we try to find, with reason and logic, our best understanding of what's actually happening in the world, and looking at current events and trying to make sense of them and understanding ourselves through the process, I think. Evolving as people, which is the most important part.
This one was good. Like, I think we're honing in.
Yeah.
We're starting to get a a sense about this thing, but it's a process of wrestling these very complex ideas out of the ether until they finally sort of gel. And that's the process. So it's been gelling for me. It's starting to get there. By the way, it leads me to a conclusion, Evie.
What's that?
Plant a garden.
Yay!
No, I'm not kidding.
A garden.
I wish I was. You're going to need it. So we're going to talk very quickly, just as a setup. This is a single slide about the Chevron deference. And Vivek or Ramaswamy, I'll take this one. He did a good job. So what was that? The Supreme Court overturned something, the so-called Chevron deference, not defense. So deference meaning to be to defer to something, right? And so it turned out this is a seismic blow, he says here, to the federal bureaucracy. Under the old doctrine, federal courts deferred to agency interpretation of ambiguous statutes, like what is clean air? We want clean air. And then the EPA says, oh, well, we're going to define a particulate limit and fines and all that. And all. So basically, it's when agencies take a vague law and turn it into a bunch of rules that act like laws. So the way the process works in our country is supposed to be that only the legislature has the power to make laws. Courts interpret them, because sometimes that needs a little interpretation. They're complicated. But anyway, that's the thing. Well, as of 2024, no longer the case. Lower federal courts have relied on the Chevron deference, somewhere between 17,000 and 19,000 judicial opinions. So then they found federal appellate courts applied Chevron in 85% of cases involving federal agency interpretations of law. And guess what? They owe us, as agencies do, interpret in ways that make them more powerful, and they're going to need a bigger budget. Welcome to humans, right? So that's the Chevron deference gets overturned. Okay. And I like, once federal courts of appeals reached that point framework, they sided with the agency 77% of the time. It was a big thing, which brings us to our judicial crisis. This is pretty bad right now. So Ada Luch asks.
Ada Luch. I'm from Spain, so maybe I don't understand it, but can someone explain how a president can receive a huge amount of votes and then have his entire agenda blown up by judges who never received a single one? President Trump said DEI must be taken out of schools. A judge said no. Excuse me. President Trump said no more money to sanctuary cities. A judge said they keep getting money. President Trump said criminal illegals must be deported.
You got to go out.
I'm so sorry. No, I'm okay. A judge said they have to actually stay. They teach us all that America is a democracy, but that doesn't sound like democracy at all.
So this is a big deal. So judges are now actually setting law and over-interpreting things. Even after the Chevron deference, judges need to stick to the law, because if they don't, they become activists, and then the whole rule of law breaks down. Law has to have both the appearance, if not the reality, of being impartial.
That's right.
That's why on every court building, when you walk in, there's a lady of justice. She has a blindfold on in a set of scales that are evenly balanced. Blind, right? So this is a very interesting exchange here in the Senate. Sorry for the pixelation. It'll clear up in just a second. And so this is Senator Kennedy, not Secretary Kennedy, talking in a Senate hearing here.
Senator, a universal injunction is what we call an order from a court enjoining the government in a way that goes beyond the parties to the case, but applies nationwide or in some cases universally to enjoin the government.
Is it sometimes referred to as a nationwide injunction?
Yes, it is, Senator.
What's the statutory basis for a federal judge issuing an order that affects people other than the parties before the court?
I'm not aware of a statutory basis, Senator.
There is no statutory basis, is there?
No statutory basis means there's no law. There's no law that allows them. There's no statutory basis to say, I have some people before me in my courtroom with a certain narrow jurisdiction, but I'm going to apply it to the whole country.
Right. This is going to affect everybody, everywhere.
And so he just asked him flat up to this expert. He's like, tell me what statutory authority, because you would normally be able to say, oh, that's Title 13, Section 5, subparagraph D.
Right.
Here's the language.
Right.
And we can argue if that language actually says that, but there's apparently no statutory authority for that.
No, Senator.
What's the United States Supreme Court opinion which interprets the Constitution in a way that allows a federal district court judge to do this? Can you name me that case?
I'm not aware of one, Senator.
There isn't one, is there?
I'm not aware of one, Senator.
No
Explain
precedent.
to me how this works. How can a federal judge issue an order that affects everybody else other than those in front of him or her? How is that possible?
It shouldn't be possible, Senator, but district courts do it all the time. I think on the theory that the courts need to enjoin a federal policy from going into effect, and they often will enjoin it as nationwide. So all non-parties are protected by that injunction.
I thought that if you wanted to affect parties who aren't in court, you had to file a class action.
That's correct here, Senator.
So why don't the federal judges, instead of issuing a universal injunction with no legal basis, tell the plaintiff, look, you got to go file a class action if you want to impact parties who aren't subject to my court?
Well, that would be the process.
Yeah, it seems that's interesting.
That's a process. So if I went before a court, a district court here, and I said, I think my car is defective, and they rule for me, and I say, but I want this to apply to everybody in the country, they would just laugh me out of the courtroom because that's what a class action is for, right?
Right.
I couldn't sue a tobacco company and give everybody, a settlement. That's called a class action. There's a mechanism. They're just not following the mechanism. They're not following. They have no statutory basis. They're not following the normal process, and they're issuing these nationwide injunctions on things. Okay.
Senator, the Department of Justice makes that argument all the time in our briefs. I think in many cases, class actions would be inappropriate. They wouldn't, the plaintiffs couldn't satisfy Rule 23 to establish a class.
So they couldn't.
Correct.
So they preferred to ask for a universal injunction.
Yes.
Does this encourage forum shopping?
Yes, Senator. Not only does it encourage forum shopping, but also district shopping and filing multiple strategic lawsuits to find one judge that will enjoin a single policy nationwide. If you have 5 lawsuits, a plaintiff, only one of those 5 cases needs to be successful.
Okay,
all right. So you can't do a class action because they know it wouldn't even fly. They would have no standing for that. It would be too hard. It wouldn't work. So then they file a bunch of suits, but they start to shop for the right district because you need a friendly district for this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you notice these things aren't being filed in, say, the Mississippi district. This is in DC, where they know they have a favorable power apparatus for, making sure that, all the power structure isn't upended. And then they know that it's way overrepresented with activist Democrat judges. And then even within that, they throw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall so they can, those other 4, we don't care because this one went to Judge Boasberg. Right. So they're judge shopping. So
and we trust he'll do what we want him to do.
So this is why I say, look, Trump has to understand what he's up against. Okay, you can fight all of this stuff off and we'll win because we're better people and, all that. He can have that frame of mind, but this is how they play. They're playing illegally, not by the rules, and doing whatever it takes to win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's going to be what he's up against here.
That really stinks. I feel bad for him. And I don't understand how it's possible to do this. Like, it just seems absolutely wrong, doesn't it? I mean, it's frustrating to listen to.
Established that there's no basis in statute and no basis in Supreme Court precedent for universal injunction. How about a common law? I mean, universal injunction is basically an equitable remedy. Did this exist in common law courts in England on which our law is based?
I don't believe so, Senator. I think the government has cited cases from the Supreme Court that says, courts are really bound by the scope of relief that a court in equity would have granted back in England before the founding. And the courts at that time would grant relief to the parties in the case, not far beyond
A universal injunction as a remedy is unknown in English common law, is it not?
I haven't done the research that far back, but I'm not aware of
I have. It's unknown. Wasn't part of equity. Only about 27 universal injunctions were issued in the 20th century. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right, Senator.
But 86 of them were issued against President Trump in his first term. Is that
what? This is what we're up against here. Wow. In the entire 20th century, there were 20 sort of universal injunctions. 87 in his first term.
correct?
I don't know the specific number, but they were a high number.
And so far in President Trump's second term, 30 universal injunctions have been issued against him, have they not?
Senator, I don't have a specific
30 so far. And we're 94 days in.
number, but that sounds about right.
The universal injunction has become a weapon against the Trump administration, has it not?
Yes.
And tell me again in my last 10 seconds, tell me the basis for universal injunction in Article 3. I read Article 3, which defines judicial power. Where does it mention universal injunction?
It does not, Senator. It says courts are to decide the case or controversy before them, which is based on the parties to the case.
So the Congress could act and say, look, federal judges, you render a decision to a plaintiff or a defendant, but you can't impact people outside of your courtroom other than through a class action. That's why God created class actions, isn't it?
Yes, Senator.
That's great.
So pretty good framing there, right? I mean, it just
Yeah.
sets up, where we're at and what this all means. So, yeah, district judges now have about 80 at the time of this thing, putting together a single district judge, putting a universal injunction out that affects the whole country, the whole everything.
What's an example of one of those that has affected us? Do you have any?
Okay, how about this one?
Okay.
Um,
This is frustrating.
This just sets up this Judge Boasberg person, who, by the way, not to judge a book by its cover, but he's got crazy eyes.
Yeah.
He looks like that
He does.
The dad at the Little League game. You're just like, oh no, this is going to be bad. Right?
Judge
Yell at the umpire.
Judge Boasberg is the same judge who claimed J6ers deserved harsher charges. He's also the judge who granted Comey FISA warrants to spy on Trump's campaign. Jim Jordan is going to have hearings on Boasberg's political bias on Trump next week. Trump should just ignore this judge.
So you could ignore the judge, but of course they're going to scream loudly. But you asked, here's one. Here's one of these nationwide injunctions. Here you go.
Okay. The Trump administration asks the Supreme Court to allow it to bar transgender people from serving in the military. A Washington federal judge halted the ban nationwide in March, and the Ninth Circuit has refused to undo that court order.
There you go. Nationwide injunction. This one judge in a district knows better than the entirety of the Trump administration and the 77 million people who voted for Trump. This one judge has a different idea about how things should go.
Wow.
But doesn't seem to have a clear understanding of how the law works or how the processes work or what their actual job is. Their job is not to interpret and intervene in an activist way. Their job is to administer the law. That's the job. They might not like the job. They might wish that they had more power. They don't actually have that power, but it's been given to them and nobody's really fought it. But this is the kind of stuff that I think if you don't remove these judges from power, and they'll say, oh no, he's an autocrat. Like, no. When you have judges who are flagrantly violating, like if you had ATC, FTC people, the air traffic control folks are purposely flying planes into mountains, you remove them from positions of power.
Right.
That's what you do.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense.
How about, Signalgate? You remember the Signal, the use of Signal?
Yes.
It turns out an NGO has sued the Trump administration. You won't believe this.
So an NGO has sued Trump admin officials over Signalgate. The judge? Why? Boasberg again, of course.
How does that happen?
That is weird. Judge shopping is a fact of life, and the only reasons it is done all relate to corruption. Wow.
Judge shopping. So they're just judge shopping at this point. It's terrible. It's not a good thing. It's actually very destructive to the rule of law.
Shouldn't it be illegal? Like, isn't there a way to how do we stop this though? What do people do?
I don't know. It's extra legal. Well, so
it's frustrating.
So I need to I need to see retroactive arrests for people who've done bad things in the past. We have one example now of a prospective. Somebody did something and they got in trouble. So welcome to this edition of FAFO time. Check this out. How about this one? A Democrat judge had to resign because ICE came in and arrested a Tren de Aragua gang member in his home. And And let me get my little laser pointery thing up.
Really?
Look at him. He's so
He's
cool. He's
harboring
flashing
them?
gang signs. He's like, dude, yeah. The judge,
Oh no.
one of these judges.
That's insane. Oh, there he is having a drink with him.
Yep. Having
On the
a
left.
drink. Hey, he seems to like sort of like
Wow.
checkerboard pattern shirts, which is kind of not surprising that that's what he's wearing when he's arrested.
Oh,
He just got arrested.
goodbye.
Mhm.
A Democrat baby boomer judge in handcuffs. Happy Friday.
Hey, how about that?
That's nice.
But as we say here, it's completely random that Judge Boasberg got 5 high-value, extremely political cases in a row, and that 100% of them are ruled against Trump. Totally random. This we have to understand. This is terrible.
It's not good.
This is bad.
Wow.
This one gets me big time.
This bothers you.
Yes.
A DC judge has blocked an order by President Trump requiring proof of citizenship to vote. Because of course they did. It's all part of the Democrat plan to continue to allow illegals they imported to vote. I really hope we can rely on the Supreme Court to actually put an end to this BS.
There's the judge down there. I'm
Wow.
not terribly surprised, again, judging a book by its cover. Kind of looks like how I'd expect somebody. But no, this idea that that it seems so axiomatically, like unequivocally true that you should be a citizen to vote. That's just objectively just like a no duh kind of a civics moment there for all of us, right?
Mhm.
It would be like saying, oh, well, Chris, a federal district judge has just ruled that your neighbors get to vote on what your kids eat for dinner, and they've decided that you're feeding them all wrong. Like, no, that's not a thing my neighbors have a say in, because they are not citizens of my household, right? It's just a very obvious thing. You would not want people from the neighboring town voting on how your town spent money. We wouldn't allow that at the town level or city level. So it just, duh. Here, obviously, it some part of their framework's like, oh, no. We're going to have to allow people to vote even if they can't prove citizenship, right? So
this is ridiculous. P.S. Do you think the Supreme Court is going to be able to be relied on to clear that up?
No. I've called them the subprime court for a long time now.
Have you?
Yeah, they gave us Citizens United. They gave us the hanging Chad, weird interpretation of the 14th Amendment to throw the election to Bush the lesser that time, way back when. They gave us, just like bad decision after bad decision and it's always, 5-4, so close, better luck next time, And every single time it's been, they hand more power to the state and they take it away from citizens, and freedom goes down,
right?
And federal consolidated power goes up every single time. Corporations more power, government more power, people less.
Yeah.
So
it's frustrating.
That's been the thing. So we have to talk about this voter ID thing real quick. And so voter ID is,
98% of Democrats voted against the House voter ID bill. 84% of Americans support voter ID.
84%.
What? Here are the arguments against voter ID and why they are weak.
So I really like Kaizen, SCIG here, if I'm pronouncing that right, under that's Kaizen. I love how this guy thinks.
Y'all remember when Trump said that the 2020 election was stolen, and then came January 6th? Does anyone, left or right, want to go through that again? Yeah, me neither. So doesn't it make sense to close any loopholes in the system before we're back in that chaos? Doesn't it make sense to make the system as trustworthy as possible? So why isn't every congressperson supporting voter ID requirements? On April 10th, the House passed the SAVE Act, which requires proof of citizenship for voter registration. It barely passed. Every Republican voted for it. 4 Democrats voted for it. 208 Democrats voted against it. That means 98% of Democrats voted against the bill. And yet 84% of Americans support voter ID. So why did these Congress people vote against it? Well, here's an argument.
The reason Democrats don't want voter ID is because they make it much more difficult for elderly people, people that don't travel, don't have a passport, poor people,
Mhm.
that don't have cars, don't have driver's licenses. So it's sort of a vestige of, I think, post-slavery laws where Black people had to prove their right to vote. It also affects women that are married. Maybe your passport reflects something that's different on your birth certificate or on your driver's license. So really, the bottom line is voter suppression.
Okay, but consider this. It costs $10 to $30 to get a valid ID. If it's that much of a problem, can't we just subsidize IDs for low-income people like Georgia and North Carolina do? Married women needing to update their documents? Yep, that is inconvenient. Senior citizens needing to go to the DMV because their driver's license expired and they no longer drive? Yep, that's inconvenient too. Over 1.2 million Black people and 500,000 Hispanic eligible voters living more than 10 miles from an ID office? Yeah, that's inconvenient too. And you know what's more inconvenient than all of this? Half the country claiming that the election is stolen every 4 to 8 years. The other half of the country insisting it wasn't stolen, but refusing to close the loophole through which it theoretically could be stolen. It doesn't help that just last week, Doge revealed that there was an unknown number of Social Security numbers tied to illegal immigrants that voted in 2024.
You know, we were in Social Security looking for fraud, waste, and abuse. And to do that, we actually looked at the enumeration system, the system by which people get numbers in America. And we found that there were just about 5+ million of them that came to the country as illegals, were giving various forms of parole or allowed in the country, and they got through an automatic system, Social Security numbers, so they get into our benefit systems. And we tracked that through and found that they were on the benefit programs. And just because we were curious, we then looked to see if they were on the voter rolls. And we found in a handful of cooperative states that there were thousands of them on the voter rolls, and that many of them had voted.
Look, every decision has trade-offs. Of course there are cons to voter ID, but the pros massively outweigh the cons. If the Democratic leaders are so concerned about these cons, just make it easier to get an ID. And how about we just be real and acknowledge that every citizen has the right to vote, and exercising that right is a little inconvenient for everyone.
Yeah, like, why is it on Tuesday?
I know.
Why can't I vote online? All of that stuff, you know?
No, I get his point. I think it's relevant. You know, we need to be able to, or be willing to pay a certain price, all of us, to have a safe and secure election, to live in this country, to have the things that we do. I mean, it's infuriating just hearing about all the people that have gotten into our benefit system that we are carrying, you know,
That's
we're paying for.
That's infuriating, particularly with so many people struggling.
Yes.
It's like, oh, we're going to need you to struggle. Where was our due process when 22 million illegal people were allowed to flood into this country by the defective last president? No border, no wall, right? Where was my due process? Because I believe that deprives me of tax dollars, of a better infrastructure, overcrowded schools, overburdened systems like healthcare, all those things that happen. Because those people come in and need things. I get it. Nobody asked me. There was no due process on the way in. And now they're all like, oh, well, we need a proper due process on the way out, because that would only be right. Like, right for them, but not right for me.
That's right.
Unerringly, always what's right for somebody other than American citizens who, as far as I can tell, a lot of people in DC, and many of them on the Democrat side, hate.
Yeah.
I think they hate us.
I think the Democrats do hate people.
I think they hate people.
They hate the
like
people they govern.
Abstract groups of people like migrants, but they hate individuals, and they hate Americans as a group.
And they seem to like people that are in a victim position.
They do.
Because then they can exploit them.
Yeah. So check this out. We're all alone. Countries that do require voter ID is all of them.
Oh my goodness.
Except for us.
That's
Haiti
everybody.
Does, New Zealand, Portugal, Estonia.
I've never
Botswana.
even heard of some of these places. What's more?
So you got that, right? You got that. And then, but you know what? You can just tell, like, that lady's like, oh, it would be so inconvenient. Think of all the poor people and the elderly people who just can't get an ID. I'm like, well, then, lady, can we work on this list? Because these are all the things I already have to have an ID for anyway.
That's right. Oh, and a lot of those same people that are getting food stamps and welfare and all that other stuff have it.
Oh, donating blood. Yes, we're going to remove the ID requirement for donating blood, or adopting a child, joining the military, renting a hotel room. What about a rental car? It's so discriminatory for people to have an ID and a credit card to rent a car. Let's remove that barrier.
Right. Or buying liquor. That's
Or
not
buying
fair.
liquor. Adopting a pet, buying a firearm.
Going to a nightclub, using a pawn shop.
It's such a stupid argument. But you saw that woman, she was very passionately explaining why it would be such a terrible thing to have voter ID. Look at all the places you already have to have an ID. You can't open a bank account. You can't pick up mail. You can't buy train tickets, insurance.
You can't get a
board an airplane.
prescription. Yeah, this is insane. Her point is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's retarded.
Thank you
All
for
right.
reclaiming that word.
All right, so let me skip that. But by the way, Elon Musk said, it must just be a coincidence that look at all the states that do not have voter ID and look at the color they vote.
Wow.
Did you notice that before?
Look at that. No, I've not seen that before.
And
Isn't
they
that
brought
weird?
in millions and millions of people, gave them social security numbers so they could get onto the voting rolls.
And
even
so that
that-
they could get supported by you and me, all us
Yeah.
taxpayers. You know why you work so hard? So somebody else can have a free apartment and,
Yeah.
a debit card given to them. That's what it is.
Well, I think
frustrating.
we should just extend the argument and very clearly say, if sometimes in tug of war, one of the winning strategies when you think you're about to lose is to just let go of the rope.
And they fall on their butt.
So
Yeah.
let the Democrats pull really hard on the voter ID thing and then go, oh, well, then we don't need any IDs to buy firearms.
That's
Right?
a good one.
As a cute stress response said.
There it
Yes,
is. Let's
do it.
remove ID from
Yeah.
purchasing firearms. Let's remove it.
And I think this is true, because this is the main point of why I'm going down this big track today.
Right. If this is not addressed, judges and voting and arrests per existing law found, then Trump loses support, and that is the objective.
And that is the objective here. So I agree. Now, this sort of gets us into one more piece of territory, which this kind of skated by, but I'm going to pull this back up again because this is very important to me personally, which is our voting systems, not the whole idea of people at the margins fraudulently voting because they have the wrong ID or something. It's chump change. What matters is we have electronic voting machines that are completely insecure. They have vulnerabilities that mean that people can undetectably change the vote totals at the tabulator level, and if not the machine level. And so this was fascinating. So Tulsi Gabbard, now National Security Director, saying this.
The very dangerous and negative consequences of that. I've got a long list of things that we're investigating. We have the best of the best going after this. Election integrity being one of them. We have evidence of how these electronic voting systems have been vulnerable to hackers for a very.
We have evidence of how these electronic voting machine systems have been vulnerable to hackers, which we also call party officials in Wisconsin, for
Right.
instance.
Or Georgia.
Or Georgia. But evidence. So evidence. So if we could, in my perfect world, Evie, if we could just go back to paper voting, right? France manages to tally up all of their votes by 9:00 that same night, right? There's a whole system for it. There's a big pile of paper ballots on the table. You have observers from both sides because nobody trusts anybody, and they shouldn't. Trust should never be part of a voting system. They should be verifiable. If you say, I want to know how many votes actually came in, you verify it, you recount the stacks. And
That's right.
Everybody agrees, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. And we would have then a system that you should never trust a voting system. You should be able to verify what happened.
It's a complete joke that we have these machines, these Dominion machines, and a lot of the processes that we engage with. It's a total joke because with the technology we have now, it doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way.
Yep.
Like, we know how vulnerable these machines are. We've known that for years. And like, to your point earlier, people like it that way.
They do. They do. So let's jump now. Mark Elias, one of my least favorite people in the world, but once all of this voting machine irregularity stuff started to come out in the voter ID, I think he sounds a little worried. What do you think?
Donald Trump, you are an election liar. You are a threat to democracy. You tried to overturn a free and fair election in 2020. You spread lies and disinformation about our voting systems and the security of elections, and you continue to lie to the American people almost every single day. And I am going to continue to say that. I don't. You can't go after some corporate overlord, as Brian said. Democracy.gov is published on its own platform, and you're not going to intimidate me. So, I'm going to continue to do what I need to do as a responsible citizen. I'm going to speak out against tyranny. I'm going to speak out against Donald Trump's unlawful actions, and I'm going to litigate. And I'm not going to be cowed or back down from that.
All right, yeah. How dare he question our safe and effective elections?
He seems to have some co-conspirators too, because he said "we're." He slipped a few times where he was saying "we're."
It's not good. By the way, remember we talked about this once before, but this is what our democracy looks like. So, when they elected their new Supreme Court judge up there in Wisconsin, I believe. They had frosted windows, they locked doors. They're not supposed. This is all supposed to be out and open. They put mail crates blocking windows. They did it all when they're counting votes behind closed doors, and it's by default. You toss the election out. It's rigged. It is no good. You can't trust it 100%. But this is when he's like, oh, we need our democracy, right? Now, do you remember, Evie, there was this incredible thing where after the 2020 election, they said, you can never question the sanctity of this. But then Time Magazine wrote this extraordinary article where the people who had pulled it off openly said, wow, we formed a conspiracy and we fortified the election results. And thankfully, we did what we needed to be done to save democracy from having Trump come back in again. Fortified. They fortified it, right? Turned out that CISA, which is this awful... CISA was the one who were picking who was essential, non-essential during COVID for some mysterious reason, right? Your restaurant closes, these people don't.
Right, yeah.
But they're in charge with cybersecurity and infrastructure, right? CISA, Security Administration Agency. So, and Chris Krebs was the head of that, and he was the person who was out there saying the 2020 election was the safest and most secure election in U.S. history, which it was the exact opposite, right? With 2,000 mules and weird results and mail-in ballots and all that, but this was worth pointing out here.
Krebs, the former head of CISA, this is a man who weaponized his position against free speech in the election context, in the context of COVID-19. A presidential memorandum to the one you just signed.
I don't know why it's skipping like that.
He might have, and further instructs your Department of Justice, other aspects of your government, to investigate some of the malign acts that he participated in while he was still head of CISA.
This is another one. I don't know that I met him. I'm sure I met him, but I didn't know him. And he came out right after the election, which was a rigged election, badly rigged election. We did phenomenally in that election. Look what happened to our country because of it. Open borders, millions of people coming into our country. Russia and Ukraine, that would have never happened. October 7th would have never happened. Afghanistan, the way that they withdrew with 13 dead, but so many killed, actually. I mean, so many killed outside of the 13 soldiers, hundreds of people killed. And maybe, I don't know, never mentioned, but I mentioned it, 42 or 43 people so badly injured, the legs, the arms, blown off, the face. And this is all because of an incompetent group of people that preceded us. And that would have never happened. And this guy Krebs was saying, oh, the election was great. It was great. Well, it's been proven that it was not only not great. When you look at all these lawyers and law firms that are signing, giving us hundreds of millions of dollars, it was proven by so many different ways in so many different forms, from the legislatures not approving to the.
Well, he goes on. I don't know why that's halting like that, but the point is he's clearly saying if the election hadn't been stolen, look at all this death and misery that would not have happened.
Right.
We wouldn't have had 10/7. We wouldn't have done this whole Afghanistan, all the disasters that befell us, the open borders, everything that happened because somebody allowed our electronic voting machines and the paper ballot system to be hacked and rigged.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they mean when they say we have to defend our democracy. They
Mhm.
mean the system that we've carefully installed that makes sure that only we end up in power.
Right.
And Chris Krebs is at the head of that whole thing. He played an important role, and here he is being singled out. So what he's signing there is it's an executive order to look into this man and his role
Ooh,
in this
good.
whole thing. Plus
Good.
his security clearances get revoked and all that. So you have Tulsi Gabbard coming out saying we have evidence.
Right.
We have Krebs now under the gun,
Mhm.
and you got Mark Elias out there sweating bullets.
I'm
how
going to keep
dare you-
litigating.
How dare you question the sanctity of the most pure election? It was virginal, you know?
No, it really does give a new meaning to our democracy, you know?
It does, doesn't it?
Like, this is my version of democracy, and I'm going to do whatever I want that benefits me and the people that I'd like to have in power.
Yeah.
It's not what the Constitution was about at
Yep.
all.
So, Barry, I have just a little bit more to go before we can switch over, but I got to finish up this little section here real quick. So this is Chris Krebs on 60 Minutes.
It's completely and utterly surreal. None of these lies have been substantiated to any extent. Every single one of them has been debunked. Chris Krebs was director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, charged with protecting the 2020 election. He called it the most secure election in American history, and days later was fired by President Trump. How secure was the 2020 election? Let me put it this way. It was the...
How handsome are you? 60 Minutes, doing whatever they can to narrative control, buffing the shine on the ball.
I know.
How secure was it?
And listen to his laugh.
the most litigated. It was the most scrutinized.
No. It was not litigated. The judges in those cases invariably said you do not have standing. None of the data ever saw the inside of a courtroom during the time.
It didn't.
None. Zero.
That's true.
The most audited. You know how you audit an electronic voting machine? You say, wow, I don't like that result. And you press the button and it gives you the same bad result. It has no audit trail.
That's right. There are no receipts.
There's no receipts. There's no possible way to audit it. It's like that. It's not part of the system.
It was the most audited.
Is he just
This
stupid?
election was put through the ringer from so many different directions. There's no evidence that any machine that I'm aware of has been manipulated by a foreign power.
We've got
that's
some
what I'm
trolls
hearing.
here.
Manipulated by a foreign power. Because we're not a foreign power, right? I guess. I mean, it's just, anyway, this guy, I hope he gets, helps us fill the gulf.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
And so this was the executive order. It says, okay, all his security clearances active are revoked, suspends any security clearance held by individuals and entities associated with him, including Sentinel-1. So like everybody he works with just had their security clearance revoked. So that puts some pressure on him. It's like, hey, dude, maybe you could leave the firm now. Because and the reviews can include a comprehensive evaluation of CISA activities over the last 6 years.
Oh, that'll be good. Good. Finally.
And these were the people censoring. CISA was censoring, ramming lockdowns down our throat, fortifying elections, like basically operating as an enemy of the United States, enemy of democracy, enemy of the Constitution, enemy of free speech, everything.
Not of our democracy, but of the democracy.
The actual our democracy. Okay. By the way, and he said there's never been any evidence of, remember this? Where a computer expert hacked a voting machine in front of the judge with a Bic pen.
Oh my God. Should I read it? In a recent Georgia trial, an expert in voting systems testified that Dominion voting system machines were alarmingly susceptible to hacking. According to the coverage by Law 360 Pulse, the expert, Professor Alex Halderman from the University of Michigan, demonstrated how he could use a Bic pen and a smart card to easily copy, edit, and change votes within seconds.
Okay, but we're all done. Wow. Like as soon as you demonstrate that once, like these machines, you just throw them in the bin and you never use them again.
Recycle.
We could just use paper. It works.
We could.
It's worked forever.
We could.
I did point out that if you go into the United States Constitution, you ask to search for voting matters. It clearly points to the idea that voting shall be done in a way that's verifiable. It describes how it has to be done well and in a verifiable way. And it describes it as done by citizens over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's right.
And by the way, it's actually right there, Amendment 15, 1870, the right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged. I consider it abridged if you force upon me voting machines that are junk.
They're defective.
That abridges the voting process, because I can look at when you put frosted glass up and stack mail bins so I can't watch the vote, you are abridging
That's right.
the vote.
And if you have people that think it's okay to cheat and they tell everybody to go home and they're not going to count any more ballots, and then they do, and they allege that some pipe leaked and that's BS. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, I've covered this all before, but we saw here that when that was all proven that the Dominion voting machines were completely garbage and they needed security patches, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger of Georgia said, "Oh, well, I don't think we can, I don't think we'll be able to get around to putting that patch in for the 2024 elections, you know.
Not going to be able to do it. It's too hard.
Too hard, you know.
Too expensive.
You know, you have to like hit enter. I don't know." And for people who are wondering, this is that Time magazine article talking about the fortification. See that last thing?
They were not rigging the election. They were fortifying it.
They were not rigging the election. They say this like with a straight face. They're like, they were not rigging the election. They were fortifying it. It's just like, come on. Come on.
So gross.
It's the craziest thing ever. So at any rate, we're going to have to call it there for the public side of this. We're going to say adios, amigos, to everybody on the public side. For people who are part of Peak Prosperity, of course, you'll continue watching over there. And we're going to be talking about this. This is what comes up next. The end is near. Evie and I couldn't find hair shirts with knotted belts, you know, maybe next time, you know, but no, the global reset's upon us. We have to talk about that end game. Huge things are happening economically right now.
We do.
And we'll talk about what we're doing about that. So with that, Barry, switch it on over. And for everybody who's at Peak Prosperity, we will carry on the conversation here now. And thank you for everybody else for being here.
We'll see you next week.